When you're unhappy in your job or career, it can sometimes feel overwhelming. You can feel a sense of despair as you really just can't work out what to do next. But what about just taking a step back and thinking about it like it's a puzzle, like it's a jigsaw puzzle or some other kind of puzzle? Well, that's an approach that my guest takes in this episode, and that's one of the things that we talk about. I'm Jeremy Klein, and this is Change Work Life. Hello and welcome to the Change Work Life podcast, where we're all about beating the Sunday evening blues and enjoying Mondays again. I'm joined this week by Christina Eanes, who is a coach, speaker, author, podcaster, former FBI violent crime analyst, and an escaplete. What is an escaplete, you may ask? We'll find that out very soon. Christina, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
So let's start here. Escaplete, or escape room athlete, as I understand it's short for. You're into escape rooms in quite a big way, aren't you?
Just a little bit. First off, I have to give you kudos for properly saying escaplete. I've heard so many different ways it's been pronounced. But yes, my daughter introduced us for her 21st birthday. She wanted to go to an escape room. And we're like, what is that? That sounds really stupid. We're going to get locked in a room and we just have to solve a series of puzzles. We can do that at home. And then one escape room later, we were hooked. And since then, it's been 4 years and almost 500 escape rooms that we've done in 20 countries and 22 states.
What is it about the escape room experience that makes you want to do 500 of them?
I know. So very exciting. Each one is an adventure, right? And quickly we learned, my husband and I are the ones that mainly do them, to the dismay of my daughter. You learn a lot about yourself and whoever you're in the room with. So not only are we on an adventure and we get challenged by cool puzzles and or just experiences, because some of them are very set-like quality, like you are in the experience, but we also learn a lot about ourselves in the process. So I'm like, I have to include this in my business. There's got to be some way. So hence, then we came out with the book.
Can you talk a bit more about your business and how escape rooms fit into that?
Yeah, so that is the latest version of how to learn more in life, how to grow. There's 3 books. The first one is Quit Bleeping Around. The second one is Secret to Super Productivity. And then the third one is Life as an Escape Room. And they all evolve around my business, which is Learn, Grow, Achieve. And I do that through speeches, through workshops, but essentially it's helping that individual learn more about themselves, how they get in their own way so they can grow, so they can achieve their goals better.
And who do you help do that? Who's your sort of ideal client or your typical client?
Ooh, good question. So I have 2 different things, right? So there's the individual. I have different products and services for the individual. And that, interestingly, it's very similar to my podcast listener group, 18 to 35 from all walks of life that just want to have life be a little bit easier for themselves by getting out of their own way. And then I also have a group of instructors and coaches that we go in and do workshops and coaching for organizations. And that's in several different industries. We've done grocery, tech, government, like contracting. So a whole bunch of different types of organizations. It's really essentially, though, people who just want to learn how to get out of their own way through like emotional intelligence or communication, presenting, speaking, facilitating, coaching, giving feedback, all that kind of, for lack of a better term, soft skills related stuff.
I feel like already that I'm almost certainly going to have to invite you back onto the podcast to talk about some of these things in more detail. But for the purpose of this conversation, I really wanted to find out more about you and your story, particularly with your history in law enforcement. Can you say a bit about when you started out in law enforcement? Was this kind of the first job, first career that you went to after school, after college?
Yes. So an interesting switch in college. So I thought I always wanted to be a biologist, and I got into upper division courses. And at that time, I had also just had 2 children. I planned it out that way because I don't plan as much now, but I didn't want to have to take maternity leave when I started my career. Goal-oriented here. So I wanted to do biology. I got up in those upper division courses. And then I realized, one, I don't care what's going inside of a cell, like what a Golgi apparatus does, or how DNA transcripts to RNA, or I don't even remember. But I was like, okay, one, if I want to support my family, I would need to go further, like a master's or a PhD, in order to effectively do that in the field of biology. Two, I've always thought of law enforcement as, it's fascinating to me, or it was fascinating to me, still is, but I didn't want to be a cop, because anytime you talk to a cop, you would find that they've either been spit on and or had to chase and wrestle a naked person. So these were deep thoughts, right, for a 20-something-year-old. Anyway, so I thought, okay, I don't want to be a cop, but I know there's a lot of other types of positions in the field, so I'm just going to go switch all my coursework over to law enforcement. That gives me 2 years to figure it out before I get my degree. And so it happened. I figured it out. By my senior year, I came upon the field of crime analysis. And I fell in love with it because it is very much like puzzles, figuring out puzzles. And so I went into that. I got certified in it. And then right out of college, I was able to get a position at a local police department. And this was in California in the US. And I became a general crime analyst.
So what does a crime analyst do?
Yeah, good question. A lot of people confuse it with criminal profiling, which it is not. So in the general crime analyst role, I did a lot of different things. So before I went to I specialized in violent crime analysis. So it would be like doing crime stats for the city. Hey, officers, we're up in burglaries in this area of the city. You need to go do more directed patrol here. Or, hey, we've had 15 larceny thefts with this particular MO. And I think it's the same group of people. Let's piece these together and try to figure out how we can go arrest them. So it's a lot of stats, a lot of data-driven type research, looking up stuff. That was the general type of crime analysis that I did. And you can also do a little bit of intel analysis on that too. So that would be like a street gang, figuring out who the players are, what the hierarchy is, different ways that you can send in the officers to maybe infiltrate the group or take out a key player to disband the group or whatever. So that would be general crime and intelligence analysis before I specialized.
And how was the interaction between that and the cop that you see on TV? When I saw that you joined the California PD, I thought you were going to tell me stories like The Rookie, which is my sort of new favourite cop show from America, maybe because I love the star in it. I was a big fan of previous stuff that he's been in. So was it a sort of very much yes, you're working with the guys who are going out and chasing the bad guys, or were you slightly seen as the bean counters in the back who were out of touch with what was really going on?
So good question. And, that all depends on the analyst. Yes, some analysts were seen as the bean counter in the background, but I got my nose into everything. And I would go on ride-alongs with the officers. I'd go to their briefings, and they appreciated me because I'd provide them with leads to help them. It's funny because there's actually one point where we had an active, and this was many, many years ago, but we had an active arsonist in the city, and they would start cars on fire. And so the officers were like, okay, this seems random. How are we going to catch this guy? And I actually did a data analysis on it, and I figured out that it wasn't random at all. And this is where we use math, folks, that we learned in school. I actually figured out through math when and where he would hit again. And I was off by 2 hours. So they were doing a stakeout in that area and off by 2 hours, and he hit a car. And they thought I was magic. They didn't realize I was just using really simple math to figure this stuff out. Yes, it was like me, and I still am Facebook friends 25 years later with several of these officers because I went in and developed those relationships. Again, you can see a soft skills kind of theme throughout my life, which is why I'm now teaching about it and working with others to teach too.
And how did you become interested in particular in violent crime?
Yeah. By age 30, I had hit as high as you could go as a civilian in the police department. And I was looking at, okay, I probably want to make this my career for the next 30 years. Little did I know, what do I do? Because I want to grow and expand, and I want to have a bigger impact, right, on the world, essentially. That's always been my theme in life. And so I thought, okay, I'll just go join the FBI.
As one does.
Why not? That's what one does. So I got to know a few of the analysts in the Violent Criminal Apprehension Program because they coordinated with analysts all over the U.S. In particular, with my state, I had one that I got to know, and I really liked what she was doing on a daily basis. So I thought, okay, can I apply for that job? She said, hey, we have openings. So I did. And I became an analyst then with the FBI's Violent Criminal Apprehension Program.
Did you have a particular interest in violent crime at the time, or was this just because this was where the opening was?
There wasn't very many levels at the analysts at the federal level. I thought, of course, it was cool because it was helping to track serial killers and serial rapists and helping to get them off the streets. And I had an opportunity to work with all kinds of police departments. So it was one of the unique roles where, as an analyst, I didn't work exclusively with FBI agents. I worked with my folks, cops, detectives. Each analyst would get assigned, it depends on, I had 5 states at any given time, and it was my job to coordinate with all the local, state, and even federal agencies in those areas that investigated violent crimes. And I would get their cases in. I would train them on our software because we had software that they could enter these violent crime cases into. Have you ever heard in the shows? And I think they even mentioned it in The Rookie a couple of times. Have you checked VICAP? It's a database. So we were in charge of maintaining that database and doing searches and trying to find similarities. It could be in location. It could be in method of operation, the MO. There's a whole bunch of different things that we could search off of. And then we could get those agencies talking together so they could combine evidence and hopefully put people away for multiple crimes.
Just by its nature, it sounds like a fairly gruesome subject area. Was this something either that you were shielded from because you were one step removed, or was it something where you just had to shield yourself mentally against or emotionally against the details that I'm sure you were party to?
Yeah, both. One, we were removed, right? So sometimes we were working on cases that were 30, 40 years old that we were helping on. So we were dealing with data. And of course, there were pictures and videos and stuff that went along with it. But we never actually would go to the scene because that's the local agency would do that initial response and all of that stuff. And they would call us in later when they needed assistance. So it was purely analytical. You are exposed to some pretty gruesome stuff, yes. So you do have to compartmentalize, but you do get a sick sense of humor anyway when you're in the field of law enforcement. Like I finally just stopped looking. I've been out of violent crime analysis for just over 10 years now. I finally stopped looking for bodies along the side of the road probably about 5 years ago. I know I laugh, but I guess it's just a way to compartmentalize. I looked at it as puzzles I needed to solve.
You mentioned anticipating this 30-year career. So when you first joined the FBI, what were your expectations as to what your career trajectory might look like? When
I joined the unit, I actually realized that there wasn't any trajectory. I'm having trouble with it. There wasn't any trajectory available. You were an analyst and that was it. So I did it for a number of years. And I thought, you know what? I want to go back up into management and leadership because before I left the police department, I was a supervising crime analyst. I thought, well, I want to go back up into management and leadership. And this was about 7 years in. And it helped at the time. I had a boss I didn't really get along with very well. So I'm like, maybe it is time for a change. And I had always on the side done some sort of training. So I taught criminal justice in college for a number of years, actually just right out of college. I was teaching criminal justice classes. So I'd always had a training background as well. Always had multiple jobs. So I thought, okay, now I guess let me go into and switch into the FBI was then developing a robust leadership development program, like reimagining everything that they had done before. I thought I need to be a part of that. 1, I can be a leader. 2, I can get more into training. And I do love these soft skills. Let me try those on. Let me give them a try on and see how I can do.
Was this a new program when you joined it?
Yes, a brand new program launching. Now, they had always had some sort of leadership program, but it was mainly for agents, which is only a third of the entire FBI population. And so this was a new comprehensive program where we actually ended up training 6,000 from line level up to executive leaders over 2 years. It was a very rewarding program for me.
What was it like being in a brand new program? I'm guessing lots of sort of cultural sensitivities to deal with.
I guess more the analogy would be you're building a plane while you're flying it. So it was more of that. It was more of we have 150 people coming to a week-long training in 2 months. So let's put together every possible thing we can to make sure that 1, they have instructors and curriculum while they're there, and then all the logistics related to that of lodging and food and flights and travel and all of that stuff.
What results did you see from this training?
I didn't stay too long after we did it because I had figured out I love this so much. My kids are leaving the house, the nest. So I'm going to go out and open my own company to do that. But during the launch, we saw, at least I thought, quite a change from more of your traditional manager type mindset to more of a leadership type mindset.
So how long were you doing it before you were starting to think, I'm going to go and do this somewhere else?
And it was about 3 years in. I came around and I thought, you know what? I started out as an entrepreneur as a kid. You name it, I was figuring out ways to make money off of it at age 10. So I thought, you know what? I don't have to be that stable force for my children anymore because they're leaving the nest. They're supporting themselves. So maybe it's time to go out and do that. Because one of the turning points was when we were putting together a class on facilitation, because that was a new thing. Normally it's the instructor leads from the front and bestows their wisdom on everyone. This was more of a, hey, let's use the experience in the room through asking powerful questions to have everyone learn from each other in the room. So it was a new concept of facilitation. So we were tasked with putting together a course like that. And it took 4 months to develop and another 3 or 4 months to deliver, which drove me crazy. Because I thought, you know what I could actually, which I do this now, a client needs a course. I could put it together in 2 to 3 days and have it ready to launch the next week. And then, of course, I would be making all the money off of it. That's a bonus. But the more idea is I get to help people. I get to help them quickly. I can launch things. And so that's what started that idea of, hey, I can do this and I can do this through my own business. And then we had a government shutdown for a couple of weeks. And then I realized, okay, yeah, I can really do this. I left and opened my own business.
So you realized that you could do it, but why did you want to do it?
Because it's exciting. It's almost like that escape room adventure, right? You don't know quite what's coming around the next corner. And you know that as an entrepreneur, that your income is essentially dependent on you. You are your own limitation. And I didn't like limitations. So I knew I could figure out how I could continually expand and do whatever I wanted to do on a daily basis, essentially.
So what was it that you recognized this could do for you that staying in your then job or moving to a similar job elsewhere wasn't going to do for you?
I love that question. So essentially no limits. I did not have anyone telling me what I needed to do, how long it needed to take. One of my huge values is autonomy, right? Independence, innovation, creativity. So there weren't any limits on that anymore. I could take it wherever I wanted, however I wanted. Of course, with that comes, what did Spider-Man? With great power comes great responsibility. Yeah. So along those lines, I knew it wouldn't be easy. It would be hard work, but I also knew that there would be no more limits on what I could do and when I could do it.
And what was the reaction of family when you started to talk about wanting to do this?
Good question. Yeah. So it wasn't a surprise at all because they know my personality. I don't like being held back in any way. And so no surprise. The kids, obviously, they go, Mom, right? My husband was supportive because he's got a nice steady government job and he likes it. So they were very supportive. Go for it.
You mentioned how you felt you were able to do this once your children had grown up and left the nest. Looking back, is it something that you figure now that you could have done and still provided for them when they were living at home and perhaps wish you had?
Actually, great question. And I've actually got that question similar to that in a job interview once. If you could go back and change anything, would you? And my response is always absolutely not, because every experience that I had up until this point made me who I am today. And so if I hadn't had all of those experiences that I did, one, I really enjoyed Crime Analysis. I did really enjoy the leadership development program. But if I hadn't had all those interactions with people, even the adverse ones, right, in our lives, I wouldn't have the experience and what I do now, all of the chutzpah, whatever that word is, to go after everything that I am today.
That's very interesting because I've spoken to a few people on this podcast, it has to be said, women who have left either starting their own business or going through a radical change of career until such a time as they feel they have fewer responsibilities. Maybe the mortgage is paid off or the kids have left or whatever. But the message that you've just given that, well, yes, they did wait, but also they've been able to draw on previous experience. That is something that has really helped them. A few weeks ago, I interviewed an accountant. Well, she was an accountant. She's now started her own dog behavior sort of training business. And she was saying just that initially her job was it was there because she knew she was going to be supporting her family. But now that her kids have grown up, she's got more time for herself to pursue what she wants.
Yeah, so it's a combination of it. Yeah, I wouldn't change any of it. Initially, I was doing it for security purposes, but now when I look back, I realized that it's really made me who I am, and it's given me all of that experience that I can use to help to relate to others that are currently in those kind of positions.
When you were first thinking about starting the business and when you were taking those first steps, what was your plan, if you had one at the time?
So I did have one, and I've always, it's been similar. It's been, I'm going to plan what I can for now. And as we've all learned from experiencing 2020, the best laid plans. So how I've always run my business is I have a plan, but I have it so much so that I can scale up very quickly or scale down very quickly if I need to. And I have it very diversified. So if one area tends to start puttering out, if you will, I can jump into another area and focus more of my attention in that area. So I've always had it where I can pivot at any given moment for whatever the market or my creativity is requiring.
Can you give an example of the sort of scaling up and scaling down? So how you've got your business in a position where you can do that?
Sure. So building a lot of relationships and collaborative partnerships. Right now, I have several instructors and coaches. They also have their own businesses, but they also interact with me and are contract instructors and coaches for me. So I don't have any full-time employees, but I have partnerships where I can utilize a whole team of amazing instructors in the classroom, virtual or in person, and amazing coaches in the classroom, or not in the classroom, or virtual or in person, at a moment's notice that they're able to do. And I'm constantly creating new collaborative partnerships so that, like I have one for a company, I have a professional development catalog of workshops, 3-hour workshops generally. A couple of them are a little bit longer that we supplement companies with. However, if I have a company that wants something that I don't offer, I've developed collaborative partnerships with others. For example, there's one company that I work with that has stellar leadership development programs. So if I have a client who wants a leadership development program, I bring in that partner and we both work together to make sure the client gets what they want. So it's all through those collaborative partnerships that you can tap into at any given point, and just making sure that you're, care and feeding and maintaining all of those relationships so that we can scale up and down very quickly.
And was this a deliberate way of setting up your business so you have got this flexibility of pulling in contractors and leaving them be when you don't need them?
Yes. Yep. Another theme, right? I don't like limits. So I want to be able to adjust on the fly for anything that I need to.
So what's your long-term vision or goal for the business? Are you ever going to be done, do you think?
I've learned not to have a long-term goal based on my past, right? So I thought, I'd be in crime analysis for 30 years. And then I thought, I'll be in the government for 30 years. And then every few years, I get an idea of maybe I just want to go in a different direction. So now I've purposely built my business out where I can do that. So I have Christina Eanes. I have Quit Bleeping Around, which is that's a podcast and a book. I have The Secret to Super Productivity, which is a book, a workshop, and a speech. I have Life is an Escape Room, which is a book, a workshop, and a speech, right? And then I have the Professional Development Catalog. But I've built my business, and why I call it Christina Eanes LLC is so whatever that next thing comes down the pike is, I can just add that to the umbrella. Total flexibility.
Was this all stuff that you figured out yourself, or have you had your own coaching to help you how to structure things in this pretty sophisticated way, actually?
I read like a book or two a week, nonfiction. I also read fiction too, but a book or two nonfiction a week on a whole bunch of different things, business, mindset, emotional intelligence, right? So I'm constantly reading, and I pick and choose little things from all of the different resources that'll work for me. And then, of course, knowing what my values are about autonomy, no limits, that kind of thing. I don't want to be constricted in any way. I figured out the best way to build the business around that to help me have that freedom.
When you've got all this information, and I'm sure there are loads and loads of good ideas, how do you work out which ones are worth implementing? And perhaps more importantly, how do you work out which ones to say no to? And,
It is
shiny object syndrome.
Yes, that is what squirrel, right? Yeah. So I actually created, I have an idea book, both written and electronic, OneNote, right? And as soon as I get an idea, I'll make note of it. And I'm not allowed to action on it right away. I have to let it sit for a little bit. Like sometimes it's a week, sometimes it's a few months, but it has to sit for a little bit. And then I revisit it. And then I think, okay, is this worth my time and money right now? I have a few little criteria that I ask myself, like, is this income generating? Will it bring me joy? Will it help others? Can I involve others, like collaborative partnerships, in it? So I go through a little criteria. And if it hits yes on most of them, I'll jump in and do it. And oftentimes what I like to do is I'll create something after I sell it. So if I get an idea and I think it's a good one, I'll run it past clients. If they like it, say, for example, like the topic of a course or a speech, I'll book it out like a month or two. And then I'll get on, once it's booked and I have a client who's interested and paying in it, I'll actually develop it then. That's how I launched my first book. I had an outline form and I thought, I like this topic. And then I shopped it around for a speech. And I booked a speech with 100 sold copies and a book signing after the speech 3 months later. So once I had that client in hand, you better believe it, I wrote out that book in about 4 weeks. And then, of course, went through the editing process and all of that and the production process. But I will often sell an idea to make sure that it does have interest before I fully develop it.
Do you think you're ever going to retire?
No, never. Ever. I will always do something in some form or fashion.
Which bits do you think you'll want to hang on to, and which bits will you get other people to do?
Oh, so I do get into trouble of trying to do too much myself because I just love it all and I want to do it. But then I remember that there's other people that can help with that. So I will assign out like the workshops and the coaching to my contractors. And then I'll focus on the creating, like the YouTube channel, the podcast, the next book, whatever that is. It generally reveals itself about a few months after one's been published. And then I focus my time on that.
And so what's the most difficult bit about your business? I mean, I'm sure that you've constructed it so that you're enjoying at least the vast majority of it, but there's got to be some bits which you go, oh, God, no, I don't want to do that.
So I do love the videos and the podcasts at times, and I generally try to get 2 to 3 months ahead in my release schedule. But when it comes down to I have to produce it, that's when I get, do I have to do what I have to write today? Do I have to do this? Right. But if I'm ahead and I can just listen to my creative whims and follow them when I need to, not a problem. But if it gets down to, okay, you've got something that needs to go out next week, you have to write something. That's when I'm like, oh, okay, fine.
You've mentioned 2 nonfiction or 1 to 2 nonfiction books a week. Any in particular which stand out, which you think is worth recommending to my listeners?
Yes. Actually, I do book reviews on my YouTube channel. And this one, I love this one. It's called How to Have a Good Day by Caroline Webb. Have you heard of that one?
No, I haven't actually, no.
Okay. So the title did not interest me at all. I'm like, I know how to have a good day. I don't need to read this book. I have great days every day. But then I picked it up and I started looking at the chapters, and it has so much information packed in there, like mindset, perception, emotional intelligence, managing your energy, and more, all in a nice, concise way. So she's gone and done all the research, and it's nicely packed into a book that's not overwhelming. It gives great tips. So I would highly recommend that one. There's many, many others I recommend, but right now that's the one that really comes to mind.
I'll certainly put a link to that in the show notes. And well, it's been great hearing your story. Where can people go and find you?
The main website, of course, I have several, is ChristinaEanes.com.
Fantastic. I will put a link in the show notes to that as well. Christina, thank you so much. I'm sure we will be speaking again before too long. But in the meantime, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
Okay then, hope you enjoyed that interview with Christina Eanes. I really like the approach that Christina has taken in kind of treating everything as though it's a puzzle of some kind. Now, obviously, in her case, she takes it to a bit of an extreme, having done, 500 escape rooms. But there's definitely something to be said for her approach of looking at a particular problem or difficulty that you may have in your life and breaking it down and treating it as though it is a puzzle to be solved. There were a couple of other points that hit home for me, which I think are worth drawing out. One is this idea of when she gets a new idea, she puts it away. I mean, she said that she uses an electronic service to do this, but she puts it away and forces herself to wait for a period of time and then come back to it before considering whether or not to take it forward or not. And then even when she does come back to it, she asks herself a lot of questions about, well, is this going to fit? Is this going to achieve what I want it to do in the context of everything else that I've got on? Shiny object syndrome is something which is really quite common. You know, you're a bit bored of something, you see something new and shiny come along and you want to give it a go. The trouble with that is that you end up with a load of half-started things that you never end up taking forward and finishing. And so this practice of Christina's to delay implementing a new idea is a really good approach. She also echoed the value of having diversity in your income, in her case diversity in her business and the different income streams that she has. But this is something that you can apply whether you've got a business or not. If the last year has shown us anything, it's how circumstances can change and how being reliant on one single source of income is really potentially dangerous, especially if that's a job that a global pandemic could suddenly bring to an end. It's a theme that's come up a few times, so do go back and listen to previous episodes. A great one to start with is episode 27 with Pete Matthew of Meaningful Money. There's a summary of everything we've talked about, a full transcript of the interview with Christina, and links to all the resources mentioned, as well as how you can get hold of Christina in the show notes page for this episode at changeworklife.com/74 for episode 74. I'm really keen to get this podcast out to a wider audience during 2021, and if any of the episodes in the podcast have helped you, then they're going to help other people. And one way you can help me spread the word is by leaving a review, ideally on Apple Podcasts. I mean, if you've got any kind of Apple device, an iPhone or an iPad, you are almost certainly going to have a Apple Podcasts app. And you can use that to leave a review. It would be great if you did. It really does help push the show up the rankings and helps other people find it. 5-star reviews are always appreciated, but if for some reason you don't think the show's worth a 5-star review, I'd actually really like you to get in touch and tell me why not, how it can improve. And you can do that by visiting changeworklife.com/contact. There's another great interview coming your way next week, and I can't wait to see you then. Cheers.